the radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Thursday night. Hope everybody's having a great week. We got a full program for you today. We got a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about the Bodega stabbing. I wasn't going to talk about this. It seems pretty straightforward and simple, but people keep asking me questions, so we'll talk about it. It's still pretty simple and straightforward. Let's see. We've got some a number of items about the stupidity. It's not even stupidity, ignorance, malice of the left when it comes to inflation. I mean, they just don't want to get it. They make an effort not to get it. And I've got some video of Crystal from Breaking Points, which is with Crystal and Seeger. I've got some video from her on what's his name show, Bill Maher's show. I got some video of her on Bill Maher's show talking about the causes of inflation, which I think is interesting. And then, Biden said some stupid things recently as well. So we'll talk about that. And then finally, we'll talk about the insanity of the new abortion regime. And we'll see how vicious. The example I'll give is just an illustration of how vicious Republicans are when it comes to this issue and how uncaring and uncaring of women, human life, they really are. And they claim to be pro-life. They're on this issue, they're clearly anti-life. So we'll talk about a particular case with regard to abortion that is making the headlines. All right, so that should keep us busy. And if not, we can always talk about immigration and the situation with migrants, if you really want to. All right. Let's see. Where do we want to? I need to remind you, of course, that we have Super Chat. You get to support the show using the Super Chat. Catherine Mendez is here to motivate you and encourage you to support the show and to get us that goal of $650. Pretty much when Catherine's here, we always make that goal, so don't make today the exception. You can use the Super Chat button at the bottom. You can ask me a question about the topics we're talking about or about anything. The beauty of this is at the Yaron Brook Show, we always have Ask Me Anything. I mean, how many shows do you know out there that are willing to take Ask Me Anything questions every single show live, pretty much from anybody who's willing to put $1 or $2 on it. $20 will get you priority, but I try to answer everybody's questions. $20 will get you priority. For those of you who are not live, you can support the show. I know lots of you, 90% of the people who listen to the show, listen to it after the fact, whether on YouTube or on the podcast. Those of you who are listening not live, if you want to support the show, show value for value. I assume you're listening because you get value from the show. Really would appreciate it. You can support the show on YaronBrookShow.com/support. You can also do it on Patreon or Subscribestar, on Locals. For those of you on YouTube, whether live or not, you can become a member of the Yaron Brook Show. Just click down right at the bottom below the video on Join. It's $5 or something like that, $6, and you can become a member. We will be starting to roll out, I promise, content for members only, including a show where I show you a little bit of the art that we have, that I have here in my home, and we'll talk a little bit about that, maybe a little bit of the condo. All right. So thank you. Jay Lord has just started us off with the Super Chat. That's good. We need somebody to kick us off. But don't forget, we've got an ambitious goal. $650 is an ambitious goal. And again, we've made it. Every show I've done from here since late May, I think we've made the goal and much more. So let's not stop now. All right. The Bodega stabbing. I think everybody knows the story by now. A woman comes in. She wants to buy a bag of chips for her kid. She uses one of those cards, which I guess she gets from welfare, like an ATM card. She uses that. It's rejected. I think it's tried several times. It's rejected several times. The clerk, the guy behind the counter, 61-year-old, takes the bag of chips and says, from the kid, says, sorry, you can't buy this. She gets into an argument with him, threatens to call her boyfriend, calls her boyfriend. Boyfriend comes in, basically goes around into the space behind the counter, pushes the guys onto the shelf, and as the guy's getting up, lunges at him. At this point, the guy takes a knife that's somewhere on the shelf there, stabs his attacker 5 times, kills him. Now it turns out that the woman also stabbed him, once she realized what was going on. He's arrested and now is going to stand trial for second-degree murder. And I think bail was originally set at something like $500,000, and ultimately that was lowered to $50,000, so he's out on bail. This is really, I really haven't seen anybody, significant voices out there really talking about really advocating for this guy to go to jail for a long time. I just haven't seen that. I haven't really looked that hard, but I haven't seen it. But this makes complete sense that he would be prosecuted, because if you think about the district attorney for New York City, this is D.A. Bragg, who I've talked about on the show a couple of times. When he got first elected, I mentioned the fact that this is a attorney general who does not believe in prosecuting things like mugging and even armed robbery. Maybe not a jail sentence. Jail sentences have to be violent. So this is a district attorney that is the opposite of law and order. That is a advocate for the criminals. That is, you'd expect him not to prosecute armed robbery. Send them off with a slap on the wrist. Don't send them to jail. But then when somebody actually defends themselves, put them in jail, lock the keys. This is a district attorney, Bragg, who clearly wants to turn New York City over to the criminals, and ran on these ideas in his campaign, got elected in a mixed election, because he got elected at the same time. The mayor of New York, Mayor Adams, got elected on a tough on crime agenda. And indeed, the mayor of New York has come out clearly on the side of the bodega owner and saying he shouldn't be prosecuted, that this was an act of self-defense. So what you've got right now in New York is a political battle between the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, and I hate to call them progressives because they don't deserve the title. We're the progressives. I'm a progressive. I believe in progress. They don't believe in progress. They're regressives. Oh, that's what we should call them. The regressives of New York City, who would like to hand over the city to the criminal element. Of course, they can't actually win long term because people don't like this. So we saw what happened in San Francisco. We're seeing what happens in Philadelphia and LA. These district attorneys get recalled. But in the meantime, they can do a lot of damage. In the meantime, this guy's doing a lot of damage. And a mayor who was elected by New York City, the less progressive Democrats and Republicans. And in New York City, Adams is now fighting for law and order and trying to get the police to be tough on crime, and that's a battle between the two, and it's going to be interesting to watch. And the bodega stabbing is just an illustration of that political battle. My guess is going to be that Bragg is going to have to fold, that there's too much political pressure on him. If the Democrats start persecuting people on such obvious self-defense claims, I mean, this is, look, if somebody attacks you physically, I agree that the first thing you should do is get away from it. I'm not a big supporter of, oh yeah, you should stand your ground and shoot the bastard. Get out of there, because you never know who you're going to shoot at when you shoot. You never know if they're not going to have a bigger gun and shoot you first. The best thing is to protect yourself, is to get out of there. But if you're behind a counter on a bodega, you're on the floor, the guy is hunkering and dominating you. You're 61 years old and he's a youngster. And there's no way for you, you can't escape. Where are you going to go? You're cornered. You're behind the counter in a narrow space, if you've seen the video. Then you have to do, morally, you have to do anything to stop the violence. I mean, this guy's a hero, not a bad guy. He's a hero because he protected his own life. So it's ridiculous to say, he should have backed off. He should have escaped. There was no way to back off. There was no way and no place to escape. By the way, the stats that I've seen, I'm not an expert, haven't looked at it deeply, but I did this a few months ago. I looked at the stats. The stats are that in stand your ground states, stand your ground basically is encouraging people when attacked to take the offensive, to not to back away, not to walk away, not to try to disengage, but to go all in. That the number of people who are being killed, not the bad guys, the good guys, the people who initially got attacked, though the number of them getting killed has gone up. And it doesn't surprise me. Most people don't know how to defend themselves, and most people should not try to defend themselves. Most people should try to get the hell out of there. Now, if you have the capabilities, and if you're known, if you know how to, if you've trained on a gun, and if you know how to use it and so on, it's a different story. But for most people, they don't know how to do it. They're only going to get themselves in bigger trouble. The bad guys are usually just better at using guns and using violence. So get out of there. But in this case, that's ridiculous. This case, as soon as you're being dominated by somebody else with force, you should be able to use any kind of force, as much force as necessary, including deadly force, in order to stop them. And the idea that you shouldn't use deadly force when you're not attacked with deadly force, how do you know the force is not deadly? And once somebody violates your rights, they're out in that kind of way, in a violent way, they're out. And if you cannot call the police, if you can't protect yourself by using the police, you have to protect yourself by any means possible, including shooting them in the head. You have to do it. But your primary concern has to be your own self-preservation. And all I'm arguing is that empirically, you are better off preserving yourself by backing off, by getting out of there, rather than standing your ground. But if you're cornered, you cannot do that. Or if you're trained and you know what you're doing, kill the bastard. So the Bodega guy, no question, it's an act of self-defense. I don't think you need a jury here. You've got the video. I don't think he should have been prosecuted. There's no question here. There really is no question. So anyway. Nobody has an obligation to run in the face of deadly force, but it's the rational thing to do. Now, if you're trying to protect your family, if there are other people involved, if you can't run, I mean, there are all kinds of considerations, but your only concern should be your own life. And your own life is better served, typically, not always, typically, by running away. It's not an issue of cowardice. It's an issue of reality. But here he's cornered, so there's no question about what is at stake. This doesn't have to go to a jury. For a matter of fact, we know he was attacked. It's not an issue of fact. again, he couldn't have run, this guy. One, he's 61, B, but more importantly is he was cornered. He had no out. No out. All right. Yeah, if you can't fight, run. You're going to lose. If you can fight, if you can use a weapon, if you know what you're doing, fine. Then do it. But most people can't fight. Most people can't fight. All right, I don't know what else is there in terms of the Bodega. I mean, it seems, again, this is why I didn't comment on it earlier. It seems pretty straightforward. It seems pretty simple. This is just a case of the prosecution going after an innocent person to make a point and to stand up for the quote rights, supposed rights of violent criminals. Once you initiate force, this is the thing. Once you initiate force, all bets are off. You have, in a sense, forfeited your life. This is why you shouldn't slap somebody in the middle of the Oscars. You shouldn't punch somebody in the nose out of nowhere. Once you literally initiate force, your life is forfeit. You don't know what the outcome of your action is going to be. And the other party is within their right. And in the passion of the moment, they might beat you to pulp. Don't initiate force. It's simple. Once you do, don't expect mercy. Do not expect mercy. God, I have a bottle of water here. Where'd it go? All right. Let me see. Are there any questions regarding this? I don't know if anybody has any questions regarding the Bodega stabbing. Oh, there is the issue of the Supreme Court ruling that basically makes concealed weapons legal in the entire country, a constitutional right. They found a right to carry concealed weapons, but they did not find a right for abortion. It's interesting. New York is struggling with how to regulate guns, given the Supreme Court decision, and I think this plays into some of this. What I think this prosecution is trying to say is, even if you ultimately carry a gun, if you use it, we're going to go after you. So you might have a constitutional right to carry a gun, but you don't have a constitutional right to kill somebody with it, even in self-defense. That's what might be politically motivating the district attorney in this case, which again is disgusting and horrible, particularly given the nature of this case is pretty straightforward. All right, let's see. We got a couple of questions related to this. Frank says, is Bodega incident a result of welfare state? The woman got angry because of her government-issued EBT card, had no funds. Are people in poverty dangerous? I don't know. I mean, you're looking for explanations beyond. The people sometimes have their credit cards denied and get angry and get all, huffy about stuff like that. I don't know that you're going to put this on this particular thing on the welfare state. The welfare state generally, I think, increases crime in the United States. But, Sweden and Denmark have much larger welfare states than we do, and they have a lot less crime than we do. I mean, a lot less crime than we do. So you can't extrapolate directly from the welfare state to crime, and you can't extrapolate. In this case, you really can't extrapolate from that. There's no reason to assume poverty. People in poverty. I talked about, when I talked about crime, I talked about the causes of crime, and part of it is desperation and a belief that there is no upside in life, and I think that leads to crime. Or if you believe that the game is rigged, that you're stuck, that you cannot advance, that everything is set against you, then crime becomes, for some people, they believe it is their only option. Now, it's kind of a fake belief because almost nobody gets out of poverty and crime, but at least they don't feel like they're stuck. But this is what the welfare state creates. It creates that kind of mentality, particularly in America. James Taylor, current self-defense law states you cannot use deadly force against ordinary physical force. Is this a proper and rational standard? Well, it depends what ordinary means. I mean, I'm not going to get into, I'm not going to get into here legal advice. I think that if somebody just punches you in the face and is walking away, you can't use deadly force. I think I think that's right. You can't justify deadly force. But if something is coming at you, they're younger, they're stronger than you, and they're just coming at you, you don't know what what the outcome of this. It might not be deadly, but you might land up in a hospital and they might break some limbs. So it really depends on what ordinary physical force means. If ordinary means I slapped you and you pull out a gun and shoot me, okay, I don't think that's self-defense. But if I'm slapping you and I'm coming at you and I'm punching you and I'm using and I'm going at you in full force of my body and my energy, then I don't think then maybe it's not ordinary physical force. I don't know what the law actually means. I accept the idea that there should be different levels of force and what kind of response is justified given the force, right? But here I think, again, because he's cornered, because the guy's younger, because he's bigger, because of the way he's interacting with him, there's just no way that's ordinary physical force. I don't know what ordinary means. You'd have to really get into the weeds there. And again, I'm not a legal scholar, so then you'd have to debate the legality of it. In my book, what I saw here, he was completely legitimate to use deadly force. And partially, look, a knife, did he know he was killing him? Maybe, maybe not. It's not, did he think? I mean, he's under attack. He's not like the guy punched him and walked out of the store. Then you don't chase the guy out and shoot him. That would be illegitimate use of force, right? Because it's not self-defense. He's not in the midst of attacking you. That Doodle Bunny says, leftist DA are prosecuting one side while letting the other run away. Yes. They're not prosecuting, property crimes. They're not prosecuting even battery. If it's, but they're not, at least not asking for jail time for battery, but they're prosecuting somebody who's acting in self-defense. It's pretty disgusting and pretty horrible. Oh, Jennifer has a $20 question on the topic. When I fought in self-defense, as a kid, the adults said it didn't matter who started it. What kind of message is that? It's a terrible message. I got the same thing. I mean, I got into fights quite a bit when I was a kid. And I mean, what does it mean even to start it? I mean, if somebody is bullying you and bullying you, I would snap and go after them. And sometimes I would go after them where it's not obvious that they threw the first punch in that particular concrete situation. It didn't matter to me. But yes, the adults all tell you, ooh, it doesn't matter who started. Of course it matters who started it. And if you don't fight in self-defense, right, or you can run in a school, you keep bumping into the guy all the time. So the first time you avoid, I mean, it's not like the first time a bully did something to me, I immediately responded with force. You try to ignore it. You try to assume it's going to go away. You try to avoid it. But once it becomes evident that they're not going to stop, you've got to take action. You've got to take action. Even if you're going to lose, you've got to take action. Because standing up to a bully often is what will stop them long term, even if you don't beat them. Theme Master says, should there be charges if you aim for the head with a gun when it's easy to hit the body and be safe? How do you make that evaluation? In the heat of a fight. Again, if somebody punches you and walks away, you can't just shoot him. You call the police and they go and arrest him. You can't just shoot them. If somebody's literally attacking you and they're all over you and they're punching away and you pull out a gun, you're now supposed to figure out, and the reality is you just shoot it at the closest thing you can to slow him down, to stop him. So I completely acknowledge that there are cases in which people overreact and should be prosecuting for second-degree murder, even if the other guy threw the first punch. Right? This is important. Your job is not to chase down the criminal and shoot him. Somebody, again, slaps you and walks away. You don't chase them and shoot them. So there are cases that are ambiguous. There are cases in which, did you really need to use it or not? But here, it's not ambiguous. The video is pretty clear. So you've got to figure out the ambiguity. You know, if the guy pushed him, shoved him, and left, or the guy pushed him, but the clerk had a way to get out the other side of the counter, so he could have walked away from the other side. Okay, but here he's literally cornered. Literally, there's nowhere to go. There's no, you know, and if you had a gun and shot him, wherever you shot him, it wouldn't matter where you shot, I don't think. Same as with the knife. He stabbed him in the neck and he stabbed him 5 times, but you don't say, oh, should have stopped at 3. That's ridiculous. Liam says, it seems if victims sanction things, crimes can go on almost forever. Yes, but nobody's claiming here that anything should be sanctioned. But sanction doesn't mean you have to fight the battle. This is what police are for. The ideal, somebody attacks you and you can get away, you call the police, they go after the criminal. That's the ideal situation. The ideal situation is not you having to take the criminal out. All right. All right, we got a bunch of questions, but they will have to wait. We've got tons of topics. And don't forget, $20 questions get priority. $20 questions also get us closer to the goal faster. All right. So I want to show a video. I think that's it with the Bodega. We can close that window. We can open this window. We're going to do a little debunking of leftist nonsense now. But not just leftist nonsense, because you can see that her opponents don't know what to say, don't know how to deal with her, don't know how to react. So we can also deal with how pathetic the opposition to the left often is. But this video, God, I mean, this is a video, I took this video from Breaking Points, which is this leftist talk show with Crystal and Sega. And, you know, they have 825,000 subscribers, 825,000. This video was watched by 415,000 views. That's pretty amazing that they get a 50% viewership of their subscribers. I wish I did. That would be cool. I'm going to show a segment where they're showing a video from Belmont, which I assume was watched by millions and millions of people. Millions and millions of people. So it tells you a lot about the culture and the world in which we live, where she can go on and say what she says and she's unopposed, really, and where this is what's really popular. This is what's really popular. Okay, let's jump in. I think we can do this. Yeah, there we go. Just background quickly. Inflation is soaring. We saw the number today, 9.1%, which again understates it because they don't measure inflation today the same as they did in the 70s. Larry Summers, not exactly a free market guy, but you know, an economist nonetheless. Larry Summers has done the calculation that if you calculate the way they did in the 70s, the inflation we have right now is higher than it was in the 1970s. So we're at peak inflation maybe in the history of the United States, or very close to it. Inflation is unbelievably destructive. The causes of inflation, people are confused about, partially because there's a lot of things going on, but they usually are. There were a lot of things going on in the 1970s. Inflation is not a simple, straightforward phenomena. Never has been. And we're talking here about, let me be very, very clear because there's so much confusion about the term inflation. We're talking here about price inflation. Prices broadly going up. Prices broadly going up. That's inflation. Deflation, prices broadly going down. You can have inflation of the money supply. That is a different type of inflation that usually causes prices broadly going up. It doesn't have to and doesn't always. That's part of the confusion. All right, so we're gonna talk about here, this would be a good opportunity to talk about inflation, explain inflation a little bit, explain some of the myths, and then we'll talk about the comment Biden made before flying to the Middle East to grovel to the Saudis. We'll talk about what he said about gas prices. All right, so that's Crystal on the right there. She's the star of the show. She's like, her performance on Bill Maher was like, whoa, this is amazing. It went viral. She was like, unbelievable, right? How good the left thinks she was. Not just the left. People thought she did.
Well, I mean, part of this inflationary problem is because we put too much money into the economy. There's way too much government spending, and that's why we have inflation. So that's a large part of that. It's just basic economics. And
that is not basic economics.
It is not basic economics. It is kind of basic economics. And now she's going to say some stuff that is half true now, but it is basic economics. It's more basic economics than anything else. Although what she has to add now is true.
We had this thing called a pandemic. We had a supply chain crisis, and oh, by the way, there's a war in Ukraine.
It's played a role.
So here we go. So she's bringing up supply chain crisis, and she's bringing up the war in Ukraine, which has been much of the Biden and the left's line. This inflation is a supply chain crisis. It's transitory because the supply chain crisis will go away. I mean, transitory for how long? Really? What are you talking about? So inflation is often stimulated by supply chain crisis. It happened in the 70s with the oil embargo, and the late 70s with Iran, with the fall of the Shah of Iran. Often these shocks stimulate inflation, but they don't stimulate inflation and avoid, because there's supply shocks all the time. They only stimulate inflation when there's also government spending a lot of money and handing it out. In the 1960s and 70s, it was over the Vietnam War and the beginning of the war on poverty and the beginning of Medicare and Medicaid, and the government just exploding in terms of spending. So when you get this combination of a lot of government spending, a lot of deficits, no stopping the deficits in sight, and together with that, a supply shock, that is bad news for inflation. That's when you get a spike in inflation. And yes, we've had all of that. So far, she's right. All these things played a role. The war's playing a role in terms of jacking up oil prices. Now, we'll get to Biden's role in that. They bring this up, and you'll see how she handles that. All right, let's take a look.
To act like the only reason we have problems now is because people got a little bit of money in their bank account is just not honest.
A little bit of money? A little bit of money. $6 trillion of stimulus under Trump and Biden is not a little bit of money. That's a lot of money. A lot of money. It wasn't just people, it was small businesses, it was across the board.
A little bit of money, they got more than we spent in World War II. So don't act like
hold on.
Whoa.
Hold on.
Don't act like, you said don't act. Don't act like we had to react to the pandemic exactly the way we did. We had to spend $6
you,
billion.
Okay, but how about the
forever flu.
trillions that the Federal Reserve shot at Wall Street? For some reason, people don't get upset about that.
Yeah, she's right. And again, this is and they don't know what to say about this. Yes, the Federal Reserve was bailing everybody out. It was spending trillions of dollars bailing everybody out. Bailing out, zombie companies, bailing out. I don't know that they really bailed out Wall Street. She says stuff here that just doesn't make any sense. But they were buying bonds. They were heavily infusing money into the market. Now, what's interesting is the Federal Reserve, when it did that, just that, in 2008, we didn't get inflation. Because ultimately, all that money, in a sense, came back through reserves that the banks held. It wasn't actually circulating in the economy, increasing demand. But when you do that and you add on top of it a layer of just what Bernanke called helicopter money, of just giving people money, demand goes up. And demand goes up when supply is constrained because of supply chain problems, because, by the way, you didn't allow people to go to work. That creates inflation. Now, she's not going to explain all that because she wants to claim that handing people money is a good thing and that it's Wall Street, bailing out Wall Street. That's the real evil. Of course, what does bailing out Wall Street means? It means bailing out companies. And what does bailing out companies actually means? It means they can afford not to lay off people, and that's to a large extent why it was done, so there wouldn't be mass layoffs, to help ordinary folk. It's always done to help ordinary folk, right? But she's not going to go there. She's not going to go there.
How much?
And
What
that
is that?
fueled the trillions of dollars the Federal Reserve shot at Wall Street to backstop the stock market and the bond market. No one gets upset about that, even though that was a massive
I don't know what
factor in
you're talking
inflation.
about. What do you mean shot at Wall Street?
Well,
when are we talking about?
We're talking about buying assets, buying stocks, buying bonds.
Federal Reserve, just as a side note, the Federal Reserve did not buy stocks. The Federal Reserve is banned for now from buying stocks. It does not buy stocks. So she's just wrong on that. They bought bonds, and they bought corporate bonds. They bought corporate bonds of a kind they've never bought in the past, including high yield bonds, which they've never done in the past. It was the first time ever in March, which is a dangerous, horrific, awful precedent. Very, very dangerous. But they did not buy stocks.
Buying treasury bills so that they expand the balance sheet.
They bought treasury bills. Why did they buy treasury bills? They bought treasury bills because the government was spending so much money. It was borrowing money to spend. Who was they borrowing from? From the Federal Reserve, was printing up money to do that.
This is during the crisis, the coronavirus crisis. When the stock market crashed, that is what the Fed did. They went into action. They shot
But the
trillions
stock
of
market
dollars
didn't crash during.
Come on, Bill Maher. Bill really shouldn't be doing this. Right? He doesn't know enough about the world. The stock market did crash in March, Bill. Have you forgotten? Yes, it recovered very quickly. But it was devastating, the crash in March. It was massive. So, these arguments about the stock market didn't crash.
It's crashing. It's crashing now.
It crashed and the Fed came in.
And whoever this guy is, I don't know who this guy is, he's supposed to be an expert on economics, and he doesn't know the market crashed in March of 2020? Really? And they can't tell her this is what happened, this is why they did what they did, they didn't buy stocks. They can't address the concrete. This is why you've got to have some expertise. You've got to know what you're talking about if you go on these shows and you do these things. You actually have to know something.
And backstopped it. That's what happened.
What, it crashed?
So,
She's right. It is what happened.
that's
never
what
heard
I'm
about
saying.
it?
No, it crashed. Go back and look at it.
I think-
it fell off a cliff.
When?
The Treasury bond market stopped functioning, and the Fed
She's
took
right.
extraordinary action it's never taken in history.
I don't
Somehow
remember
no one
that.
gets
Maybe the
upset.
first week of the-
Somehow nobody gets upset about the rich people who got tons of money and tons of support,
Oh, yeah.
way more than working class people did.
Sure
but
they
oh
do.
my God, people were able to feed their kids and they had a little bit of money in their bank accounts. It was the worst thing in the world.
No.
That is one small part of the inflation story, and it is, by the way, not the only thing that we can deal with to get out of this mess.
Well, gas
so
prices.
Biden has
Is it a small
advocated-
part, Jamie? or is it-
Gas prices we can largely attribute to an administration that's been waging war on the fossil fuel industry.
That's ridiculous.
And
They
now
drilled
demand,
more than everybody. I mean,
That's the talking
U.S.
point. That's not
U.S.
true.
production.
No.
Okay, U.S. production is up.
His production is up from where?
It will be at record levels next year.
Okay, well-
the fossil fuel companies themselves.
So here's U.S. production. Let's see if I can find this. U.S. production. So she's partly right. And this is why they're so weak. They're really not, they're not at her level. And this is why the left wins, because she's just more convincing. If you look here, this is U.S. production since 1920. And you can see it peaked just before COVID. This is February 2020, where it peaks. And then it collapses during COVID. And since then, it's been steadily going up. Even under Biden, supposedly, it's being steadily going up, slowly, in big swings because a lot of uncertainty about COVID. But, and it could be that next year it'll be above the 2020 number. Doesn't look like it from this graph, but maybe. It's certainly possible that it could be there. So she's not completely mistaken. Of course, she would like, where she's being hypocritical, is she would like this to slow down dramatically. She's an anti-fossil fuel, nutcase, and she would like crude oil production to slow down even more than Biden would. But, here we are. And, the guy who said it's Biden's attitude is right because of the next point that she is going to make. And let's go to that. Go back. Yeah, but I want me to be in the lower window. Not there. I want there. There we go. So let's listen to her. Oops, clicking on the wrong button. There we go.
Themselves are flush with cash, but will not invest in new drilling because they would rather give it to their shareholders.
Why will they not invest in new drilling? I mean, that's straightforward. Come on, guys. That's simple. They won't invest in new drilling because Crystal, and the Biden administration, are demonizing oil and gas. And therefore, oil and gas is worried that there is no future, that the government is going to limit their ability to sell. Why would you invest? Why would you invest when your investors, BlackRock and others, are following ESG, promoted by Crystal and the Biden administration, that is basically telling them, we're not going to support you, we're not going to support management, we're not going to support the corporate plan if you're going to drill more. If you're going to drill more, we're just not going to support you. So,
okay, all right,
that's the truth.
So that's her appearance on Bill Maher. And, a few things. One, you can tell from that is what the left wants to do is find a way to blame inflation on the rich. And the last thing they want to do, the thing that scares them the most, is blaming inflation on government spending. Because they believe government spending is unlimited. They believe you can spend all you want and government spending has no impact. Of course, by the way, one of the things that really pisses me off, and the left does this with some libertarians, is they view the Federal Reserve as if it's not part of the government, right? The Federal Reserve is the government. When they say, yeah, but the Federal Reserve bailed out the rich, well, that's the government bailing out the rich. That's your government doing it. And if Biden had been president during March of 2020, would the Federal Reserve not have bailed out, quote, the rich? Of course they would have. So, they treat it as this evil, separate institution. You know how you know that the Federal Reserve is a government entity and not a private entity, like some people claim? Who gets the profits? When the Federal Reserve makes a profit, who gets the money? Quote, shareholders? The so-called private owners? Who gets the profits from the Federal Reserve operations? The Treasury does. And who's going to pay to run the Federal Reserve when the Federal Reserve starts taking losses? And later this year, it's likely that the Federal Reserve will start losing money. The Treasury, the U.S. Treasury. So A, it can't be independent of politics, and B, it's owned, operated, run by the federal government. It's not some separate entity. It's supposed to be independent, but it can't be. It's a political entity. So the left is trying to blame, the Fed. I'm fine with blaming the Fed. But they're trying to blame the rich. They're trying to blame corporate America. They're trying to blame anybody except government spending. So Biden, before he left for Israel, and Israel's just a stop on the way to dance with the princes in Saudi Arabia, but Biden, before he left, said, he said that, I think he tweeted, that his appeal to gas station owners to lower the price. Really, guys, you're making enough profits. You can lower the price of gasoline. Just do the right thing. Now, who owns gas stations? A significant majority of gas stations in the United States are owned by individuals or by small businesses. Maybe a small business that owns a few gas stations. Do you know what the margin is on a gallon of gasoline that you pump into your car to the gas station? It's maybe a few cents, maybe. There are oftentimes, because of how competitive the business is, that the gas station is actually giving you gas at a loss. How do gas stations make money then? How can they sell gas at a loss? You know what the profit center is at a gas station? The profit center at a gas station is the convenience store. It's not the gas. It's the convenience store. That's why they really want you to come inside. They really want you to sell, to buy some cigarettes or buy some chips or buy a soda or buy something, because that's where they make their money. And even there, it's not like these are products that have super high profit margins, right? They have higher profit margins than the gasoline. And yet Biden, in his ignorance, you think he have advisors who know this stuff. This is not rocket science. This is pretty straightforward. You know, this has been discussed over and over again, many years, many decades. There's been talk about this. Somebody, you know, they talked about nobody monitoring Trump's tweets. I don't think Biden writes the tweets, but whoever's writing the tweets, God, somebody should monitor them for basic truth. Well, not even truth, but absurdity. I mean, I understand going after gas companies, the big. I mean, what he was saying was most gas stations are owned by these big companies. Just not true. Not true. Not true. Yeah, stuff at gas stations is always expensive in any country because, again, that's where they make the profit motive, and they figure they captured you. Because once you're filling up gas and you walk in there and they've got all that tempting chocolate or whatever, or drinks or whatever, or you're on a road trip, you need something to drink, or you need some coffee, or you need a sandwich. Yeah, it's going to cost you a lot of money to get it. But that's where they make the money. The gas is cheap. The only people really making money, profits really, are the people who sell oil. Because the cost of drilling the oil does not change that much. But they can sell it at a much higher price because of, I mean, even the refiners in the United States, because the capacity is so constrained, they're making a nice profit. But again, that's unusual. Usually they don't make much money. Usually margins are very low. And this is true, by the way, of the drillers as well. Because Saudi oil is so cheap to produce, Saudi Arabia can make a profit at 30, 40 bucks a barrel. American oil producers need oil to be significantly higher than that to make a profit. So it truly is astounding. Oil has been, by the way, at 100 bucks a gallon before, in the past. We didn't get inflation. So oil is not the cause of inflation. It exacerbates, but it's not the cause of. Inflation is a mismatch over the entire economy of supply and demand, where demand exceeds supply, either because one of three reasons. Because there's too much demand, because there's too much money, a significant increase in the amount of money people hold, one cause of inflation, or the amount of money has stayed constant, but for some reason, the number of goods has shrunk. Some external event has caused the number of goods to shrink, supply chain problems. So the same demand, less supply, more money chasing fewer goods, prices will go up. And three, both things happen at the same time. And in the United States, what happened over the last 2 years is both things happen at the same time. You got massive increases in demand, $6 trillion of money handed to people who then spend it, have been spending it, are spending it. And at the same time, because you didn't allow people to go to work, a shrinking in supply, a disruption of supply chains, not just in the United States, across the world, because everywhere in the world, particularly in China, they didn't let people go to work. And now you've got both hitting at the same time. And the same thing, again, to some extent happened in the 1970s. You got massive amount of government printing money, particularly after we go off the gold standard. But even before that, government running huge deficits, spending money like crazy. And at the same time, a shock to the global economy with the oil embargo. that shrunk supply. And you got both of those. This time, it's bigger because the supply shock is bigger. It's not just gasoline. It's not just oil. It's everything because of what governments did during COVID. So on both sides of the government's response, they caused inflation. By not allowing people to work, they shrunk supply. By giving people money, they increased demand. And that is inflationary. So the left is going to continue to blame everybody except government spending. They're going to keep looking. They're going to keep figuring out. But they will constantly blame the rich, corporations, businesses. The selfish, greedy motivation will always be supposedly at fault. All right, Richard, thank you. Richard is in the house. Richard asks a lot of Super Chat questions with big bucks. Michael is back. We missed Michael on Tuesday. I didn't see him on Tuesday. But let's see if there are any questions about inflation. Richard is not asking about inflation. That's not asking about inflation. Ryan. Yeah, Ryan's asking about inflation. Okay. So Ryan asks, hi, Ron. I have a hard time explaining inflation to other educated adults. That inflation is primarily driven by monetary policy. Friedman wrote that you can end inflation instantly, stop printing money. How do we educate? Well, as I explained, it's a little bit more complicated than that. I know, you know, it's true that it's almost always a consequence of just printing money, and if you stop the printing presses, you stop inflation. And Milton Friedman illustrated that in places like Ecuador, where they literally stopped the printing presses, and inflation went away. Or in Ecuador, ultimately, they dollarized. They went on the dollar, and since the Federal Reserve at that point in time wasn't printing like crazy, Ecuadorian inflation disappeared because now they were buying stuff with dollars. So one way third world countries have dealt with inflation is by dollarizing their economies, by getting rid of their own printing presses. So while that is true in many cases, I think it's wrong not to look at the supply side as well. And it's wrong not to look at what you think of as inflation expectations. And inflation expectations are driven to some extent, not by the printing of money today, but the expectation that you'll print money in the future. So I'll give you, so the example right now is, let's say right now you come to the conclusion that the U.S. government will never repay its debt. It has no ability to repay its debt. Well, then there are only two options facing the U.S. government in the future in order to deal with the debt. One is they can default on that debt, but that's a pretty brutal thing to do, and most governments try to avoid that at all costs. So what's the second thing you can do in order to repay the debt? Well, you can print money like crazy and use that money to repay the debt. What is that doing, that printing of money? That's inflation. That's inflationary. So you can assume, one day the U.S. government will have to print money in order to repay the debt. Means the dollar's worth a lot less. Its purchasing power is a lot less in the future. I'm going to price it in today, and I'm going to start setting inflation expectations today. It's hard to completely grasp that concept, but that's part of what's going on. And it's why part of the solution to getting rid of inflation has to also involve the government regaining credibility regarding paying off the debt. And as I said, I don't think that'll happen until Republicans win the House and Senate and negotiate some kind of budgetary deal with Biden to cap spending. I think that's the only way you'll ultimately get rid of inflation. All right. So it's not as simple. Inflation, like a lot of economic concepts, are hard concepts, and it's hard to explain to people. But one way to do it is try to break it down into a small economy. Let's say there are 3 items of goods, and let's say there's $10 in the economy, and $10 distributed among a number of people, and they're bidding for these, they're buying these goods. Well, these goods, the total price of these goods can't go higher than $10 because that's all the money there is in the economy. Let's say now I artificially double the amount of money in the economy to 20, but there's still the 3 goods. But now people are going to bid up every one of those prices to try to grab it because there's a limited number of goods, and they're going to bid them up close to 20. Right? Now, the only way you can double the amount of money and not see inflation in an economy with only 3 goods is to increase the number of goods. If you double the money from 10 to 20 and you, let's say, double the number of goods from 3 to 6, theoretically, prices won't change. The prices of the original 3 goods won't change because the extra $10 will go into the extra 3 goods. And this is why money, the amount of money, this is the flaw in Bitcoin. The Bitcoin is a finite amount of money. It should never be a finite amount of money. Money should grow with productivity, because the fact is that as productivity increases, the number of goods increases. And in order to get stable prices, the amount of money needs to increase as well. Because imagine now you have $10 and 3 goods, but now one of the goods disappear and you only have 2 goods and they're $10. What's going to happen to the prices of these 2 goods? They're going to go up. So just shrinking supply can cause price inflation, right? And that's the argument the left is making. This is all supply chain, right? But now let's say you've got Bitcoin, and they can never be more than $10. Never be more than $10. They're only $10. But now there's 6 goods. Well, prices are going to go down. Now, maybe you think prices going down is not a problem. Maybe it's not. But it does mean that it's going to go down. Prices will go down. And price stability, the nice thing with gold is, as productivity goes up, your ability to mine gold becomes cheaper, and therefore you mine more gold, so the amount of money goes up. And you could have put that into the algorithm with Bitcoin. You could have made it so that every additional, you could have made it an infinite amount of Bitcoins, but every incremental Bitcoin costs you more, which is the case today, but not finite, and therefore productivity would have to go up in order for you to mine more Bitcoins, and then you would get more like price stability under the Bitcoin regime rather than declining prices. All right. Anyway, so Robinson-Crusoe type examples are the best way to illustrate these things to people. Now, the real world obviously is more complicated, more intricate, but that's where you should start. That's where you should start. All right, let's see if we have any other $20 inflation questions. Oh, Dave had Dave, I missed the Bodega comment. Dave says it probably took him and his brothers life-saving to open that bodega only to be harassed and assaulted by jealous street vermin. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if jealousy was the motivation. It's just somebody who can't control his emotions and is violent. And it's absurd. And yeah, absolutely. Okay, Richard asks about inflation. As a young person thinking of buying a home soon, do you think the current inflationary trend will make it worse market in the near future, 3 to 5 years compared to now? Very hard to plan for the future in this context. It is. And this is the damage that inflation does more than anything else. The real damage inflation does is the uncertainty it creates. It creates uncertainty about the future so that you can't tell what your money's worth. You can't plan for the future. You can't tell whether you should buy today or buy tomorrow. You can't tell what to invest in. It distorts all the price signals. And more than ever, people are confused, and now you got the Federal Reserve. Will they overreact? Will they underreact? Will they manipulate it this way? Will they manipulate it that way? What will happen in the midterm? A million different parameters are going into these things that have to do with what will the central planners do. And that creates massive uncertainty and confusion. Now, I think inflation is going to get worse. For how long, it's hard to tell. I think the first chance we'll actually see of significant and sustained reductions in inflation are dependent on what I said before. One, the Fed will increase interest rates. Two, the Fed will start shrinking its balance sheet. It already started, but pretty mildly. It is going to start getting more aggressive after August. And three, a budgetary deal will happen in the House and Senate with Biden. When those three things happen, that's when I think you can, or when those three things look like they're going to happen, because the market's always anticipating the future, that's when I think interest rates will start declining, inflation will start coming down, mortgages will come down significantly. I think in the meantime, now is not a bad time to get a mortgage, because interest rates, I think, are only going to go up from now. While we are going to have a recession, I'm pretty sure we'll have a recession, maybe we're already in a recession, the challenge is that usually people assume that in a recession interest rates are lower, but if we get stagflation, which I think is where we're heading, interest rates can be very high and we can have stagnation and we could have a recession. So very difficult to plan for the future. Might as well get a mortgage now. If interest rates go down significantly, you can refinance, but if interest rates go up significantly, you're locked into a low rate. So now is not a time if you can afford it. If not, if you can't afford to buy it right now, then just hold on and wait to see how the market evolves. Maybe in 5-6 years, interest rates will be back down again. The market right now, the bond market is expecting interest rates to be back below 2% within 2 to 3 years. I think they're way too optimistic, but that's how bonds are priced right now, which I don't understand. There's a lot in the world I don't understand, but I don't understand the bond market right now. Don't understand the stock market either. Ryan says, that is a great example. I've never heard that context before. Very helpful. Thanks, Yaron. I'm better equipped. Excellent. I'm glad you're better equipped. Let's see. We'll talk about that later. So Adam asks, what is your reason for believing that a sufficient number of Republicans, the populist, nationalist, Christian party, would want to cut rather than redirect government spending? Well, history for one. I mean, Republicans have a story about being fiscally conservative when they're in opposition to the Democrats. They're going to be in the opposition because the White House will still be Biden's. I think for 2020, I think if Republicans win the White House, the House and the Senate, they'll spend like there's no tomorrow, like they always do. So I'm not saying Republicans are going to cut spending. I'm going to say Republicans will cut a deal to cut spending when they're in the opposition. That's what they do when they're in opposition. That they always rediscover their fiscally conservative roots in the opposition. Never when they were the party in power. And I think they'll continue to do that because the fact is that their base wants to believe that they're physically conservative. They're not, but they want to believe they are. It's part of the mythology. It's part of who they're supposed to be. So I still think they strive towards being physically conservative. But as soon as they get the power, they dump that and they start spending money in the name of their agenda. In the name, in this case, of populist, national, Christian stuff. That's good. Populist, nationalist, Christian stuff. I like that. We should have an acronym for that. Popular, national, PNCS. PNCS. Doesn't sound right. Somebody come up with a good acronym. All right. Thank you, Adam. Okay, so one more from Richard on inflation, and then we'll go to my last topic and then open it up to questions. My professor said the relative lack of insulation, I'm not sure what you mean by insulation, during the 90s and 2000s was due to opening of India and China to the world economy. Maybe you mean inflation. To the world economy, relatively cheap wages and growing workforce put downward pressure on prices. Thoughts? Absolutely. There's no question that there was massive downward pressure on prices for the last 40 years, really since the early 1980s. that has only accelerated. It has increased the standard of living of Americans dramatically, particularly poor Americans. And it has made it possible for the Fed to have relatively loose monetary policy, much of which went into the stock market, generally in asset pricing, and not see price inflation because of the downward pressure on prices. So what you because of China and India. So what you should have seen during this period is steadily declining prices throughout the last 40 years. And the reason you didn't see that because of increased productivity in China and India. So when productivity increases, prices should go down if the money supply stays the same. So during that period, if the government had kept, if the Fed and the government had kept the money supply growing slowly, you would have seen declining prices. The reason you saw relatively low inflation, still upward but low, is because the government was inflating the money supply, but we were also increasing the number of goods. So demand increased, people had more money, but so did supply because of China and India. So the increased supply held prices down. So that's the thing about, you can affect prices in both dimensions, by changing demand or by changing supply. And sometimes both change at the same time. That's what happened in the 1980s, 90s, 2000, is what's happening right now, just in different directions. All right. Let's see. Oh, Richard says, apologies, I meant to say inflation, autocorrect, super chat, interference, mobile device isn't great. All right, we got that. Let's see if there's other stuff on inflation quickly. Not that. Harper Campbell says, the compound interest effect. If we lose $1 of economic growth over a generation, that's the difference between us and Mexico. Goodbye, life extension, other technological breakthrough. You mean 1% of economic growth a year, not over a generation. You lose 1% of economic growth over every year for a generation. You become, that's the difference between the U.S. and I think it's over several generations, is the difference between us and Mexico, and you lose all of that. But we're talking about annual compounding, not just 1% over a generation. That would not have a big impact, but it has to be compounded every year. Not that. Liam asked, will inflation be the death of the West? Was it the death of Rome? We reversed our inflationary downward spiral in the 70s, but people were less unthinking and corrupted back then. No, I mean, inflation is just a symptom. It's not the cause of really anything other than, economic misery. It doesn't bring down the fall of Rome, and it doesn't bring down the fall of Western civilization. Rome fell because of Christianity, because of an abandonment of, the last of the Roman values, because of a complete corruption of the leadership, because of all that was left when Christianity, helped dismantle Rome. All that was left was hedonism and nihilism, really, it's not even fair to say that Christianity destroyed Rome. What destroyed Rome was Plato and the Neoplatonic ideas that were a big part of Christianity. So I don't think it's inflation in and of itself. I don't think we're on the verge of the end of Western civilization. We can actually live quite well with inflation because we've accumulated so much wealth. All right, let's see any other inflation questions. Cook says, Crystal and Saga were downplaying inflation concerns in the spring of 2021, said you get at me in 6 months if inflation gets worse. Now they blame greed. Well, of course. I mean, they never take personal responsibility for their beliefs. Ryan says, restrictions on oil production are purposeful and intentional supply chain issues. Well, they're purposeful and intentional to some extent. A lot of people who attack the oil industry also don't like blackouts and stuff like that. They, and then they pretend that the two are unrelated, and it's intentional in the sense that they hate climate change. It's not intentional in the sense that they're not fully cognizant of the impacts because they can't think. They're evaders on a massive scale. Okay. Thank you, Enric. Thank you, Ryan. I'm looking at what people argue. Chips. Michael asks about, I guess, the Bodega. I've heard people argue we should just, he should have just given the woman the bag of chips and de-escalate and avoid violence. Would this be rational self-defense strategy or a sanction of the victim? I mean, if he thought his life was in danger when he, because he took the chips away, then he should have given her the chips and called the police, right? He would have had the video of her threatening him. I don't think that's exactly how it played out, right? I think that he took the chips. He was arguing with the lady. She called her boyfriend. I mean, all of this happens pretty fast, and he pushes him, right? So there is a point in which, yeah, take the chips and I'm calling the police is a rational strategy, because again, you never know whether you pull out a knife, he doesn't pull out a bigger knife on you. So it's a question of whether you want to fight over the chips when you do have access to police. Now, if you don't trust the police, if you don't believe in the police anymore, that's a problem. That's where civilization breaks down. Yeah. All right. Boaz asks, do you think the Fed will be able to stop inflation in the long run? Well, it depends what you mean in the long run. I think one way to stop inflation is to default on the debt. I think it's, in the end, more likely that the government defaults on the debt than it inflates its way out of this. Inflation is just, there's no way to inflate yourself out of it if you think about the impact of inflation. So do I think in the long run? No, I don't think you can stop inflation. The only way to stop inflation is to commit suicide. That's how I think it'll end. It'll end with the collapse of the U.S. economy. That's how inflation ends. When that happens, I don't know. But the more time goes by and we don't do anything, the more likely it is to happen sooner rather than later. And Boaz asks, is there a chance that we will have both inflation and recession despite Fed increasing rate? If you were the head of the Fed, what would you do? Yes, I definitely think we can get inflation and a recession. I think that's what we're going to have. I think in the fourth quarter of this year, we will have both relatively high inflation and be technically in a recession. Recession is two quarters of negative economic growth, negative GDP growth. So yes, I definitely think that you will have that stagnation and inflation in the fourth quarter of this year. If I were the head of the Fed, what would you do? I would be a lot more aggressive about what the Fed is doing right now, but more importantly, I would be urging the president and Congress to do everything they can to balance the budget. Not to balance the budget, to have a surplus budget. I would be, and to present a plan to go to surpluses quickly, I would be haranguing the senator from West Virginia, Manchin, who keeps blocking the Democrats' spending plans. I would give him a medal. I would declare him as a hero, and I would encourage him until the Republicans have more power in Congress to stop every single attempt possible of Democrats to spend more money, which they continuously are trying to do. And Manchin, I have to say, is relatively heroically standing up against them and stopping that from happening. So good for Manchin. Republicans, by the way, would never do that on this issue, but Manchin is doing it, so good for him. All right. Let's see. Linda, thank you for the support. Really appreciate it. We have already raised we're only missing $189, $190 to get our $650 goal. So hopefully we can make that in the next half an hour or so, although we've got a lot of questions. So maybe I'll need more than half an hour to cover them. Plus I have another topic. So I'm going to cover this other topic quickly, and then we'll get back to your questions. And you're going to give me 2 minutes because I'm going to grab a bottle of water. All right, sorry about that. I needed water. I was dying out there. All right, let's see this. I don't know if you guys have heard of this abortion case, but this is the kind of case we're going to see more and more of. And I think what this does more than anything is it illustrates the nastiness of the conservatives, of the anti-life, which means anti-abortion activists on the Republican side. So it turns out that a 10-year-old girl in Ohio was raped twice, and got pregnant. A 10-year-old girl got pregnant. The law in Ohio was such that she could not get an abortion. Let me say this again, a 10-year-old girl. She doesn't have a body to give birth, but you can't have an abortion. So she's in Ohio. She can't have an abortion because I think, she went to get an abortion after 8 weeks of pregnancy. I don't think she knew she was pregnant. She's a 10-year-old girl. She's a child. So she finds a way to get out of Ohio. She goes to Indiana. Indiana still hasn't passed their horrific anti-abortion law, which they're going to pass any day now. So she goes to an abortion clinic. They file all the paperwork. They do everything necessary, and she gets the abortion, which is wonderful that she can get the abortion. Good for her. Good for the doctor in Indiana who does this. And by the way, this abortion, I think Biden mentions it, and immediately all the Republicans claim it's a hoax. And they've actually all have had to delete their tweets where they claimed this was a hoax because it was real. They've found the rapists and they've arrested him. 100% true. And imagine the state of Ohio has a law that says that this 10-year-old girl has to carry to term. I mean, can you imagine the horror of that and how disgusting that is? But now, the Attorney General of Indiana, who is a very politically ambitious Republican, is basically looking into criminally prosecuting the doctor who performed the abortion. He's going to check the paperwork. He doesn't think the paperwork is filed right. And if the paperwork is not filed right, he's going to criminally prosecute. This is where we are. This is what we've become. This is how disgusting a situation we have in the United States of America. Where if you're a woman, if you're a 10-year-old girl, you have no liberty. You are now a ward of the state, and you are now assigned to be incubating a baby that the state deems an interest in you having at 10 years. This is insane and disgusting, and this is why some people never vote Republican. And just look at the picture of this smug bastard. Look at that. Yeah, there you go. There he is, the Attorney General of the state of Indiana. just horrible. Just horrible. And I mean, the idea that abortion can be illegal, even in cases of rape and incest, even in cases of 10-year-old girls, even in the first trimester or the second trimester, it's just insanity. It's insanity. And it's hard to believe that, well, I guess it's not hard to believe that religious people buy into this, but evangelicals never used to be this anti-abortion. This was a Catholic thing. That in principle, life begins at conception. It was never an evangelical thing, but now it's affected the evangelical movement and really the entire right, even some of the secular right, and it really, really is disturbing. You know, this issue of abortion is not a marginal issue. This is a major and important issue, and it just shows the Republican Party as a medievalist party, a medievalist party. All right. Let's see. All right, so that is it. We're going to turn to Super Chat questions now. We are going to, let me just give you a quick report on where we are. So we have raised $490, so we're basically $160 short. So that is 6 $20 questions. That is very doable. Catherine here and is committed to getting us across the finish line and getting us to there. Richard has been very generous. You know, $150 contribution, and we're almost there. You can ask me questions about Biden in Israel. You can ask me questions about Saudi Arabia. You can ask me questions about a lot of different things. There's only so much of the news I can cover. We're already an hour and 20 minutes in, and I've got a bunch of questions. No questions below $20, please. From now until the end of the show, $20 or above questions will be answered. Don't introduce questions that are below. Let's take these on. Richard says, I'm so tired of living in these theocrats' madhouse. No idea what they're doing, what we're going to do about it, but I'm beginning to think that is proof that Republicans are completely a lost cause. I think Republicans are a lost cause, unfortunately, because the Democrats are also certainly a lost cause. But in that sense, politics is a lost cause, and I think politics is a lost cause for the next, 10, maybe 15 years. It's hard to see a way out of politics right now. It really is disturbing. And I think the theocrats have the upper hand. The theocrats are going to dominate, and it will not be pleasant the more power they get. It will not be pleasant. All right, let's look at Michael. Why do we all have different personalities? Well, we have different personalities because we make different choices, because we have different personalities because we're exposed to different things when we're children. We respond. In other words, we choose to respond in different ways to different things when we're kids and when we're teenagers and when we're adults. So we have different experiences. We encounter different things. We have different parents. We have different genes. So we have different inclinations. We have different, traits to some extent. So there's a lot that's different. You look at the world and you see different things. You learn different concepts in different orders. All of that impacts who and what you are. And as you grow, particularly as you enter your teenagers, you start being conscious of that. And that's where you should try to shape at least that part of your personality that is still within your ability to shape. And I think a lot is still in your ability to shape. So that's when the more conscious you are, the earlier you are, the conscious you are of your own thought process, of your own values, of your own desires, of your own values, really, but in your own thinking and your own emotions. The more you can shape your own soul, the more you can shape your own personality. All right, Richard asked, the greatest kung fu communist bandits of all are the central planners at the Fed. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they are bandits because, you know, bandits usually steal money for themselves. And here they're redistributing money. It's not exactly the same thing. And then, of course, much worse than the Fed was Stalin, is worse than the Federal Reserve. Mao Zedong is worse than the Federal Reserve. We have to put things into perspective in terms of state of the world, what people are doing relative to what is the evil that is possible out there. And it could be a lot worse, and has been in different cultures, a lot worse than what we have it today. So while the people in the Fed are bad, I wouldn't call them the worst communist bandits of all time. Richard says, I agree with Rand that Christianity was the fatal flaw of capitalists in the 19th century that ultimately led to the rise of collectivism. I don't know that, yeah, okay. Do you think that America was less religious in the 1970s and 80s than it is today, or the 40s and 50s versus the 80s? I don't know. It depends what you mean by religious, right? I think America became more religious during the 70s and 80s and 90s with growth in the evangelical movement. I then think there was a certain disenchantment with evangelicalism, and a lot of people left evangelical churches. That started in, I don't know, after 9/11, maybe in the mid-2000s, and you're seeing a significant decrease in the number of Americans that affiliate themselves with any given religion, any given church. But I don't think that the reduction in affiliation with particular religion, particular church, is a reduction in affiliation with mysticism. I think mysticism is the bigger concept, and that I don't think has unfortunately come down. I don't know how religious people were in the 40s and 50s. I don't have a good sense of that. And what does it mean to be religious? People, they're not atheists, but how often did they go to church? I don't know what the statistics are in terms of church attendance and things that would signify religion, to what extent that has changed over time. I do know that in the last few years, church attendance is down and affiliation with organized religion is down. I don't think mysticism is down, unfortunately, but that is. I don't think advocacy of reason is up. So you have to be careful, but I think that ultimately you have to say that the real flaw of the capitalists was the rise of, it wasn't that they were Christian, it's that they were in certain areas in their life that did not relate to work, they were irrational, and that they gave in to mysticism, and that when they sought secularization, when they start to escape from mysticism, what they encountered was German Romanticism. What they encountered was Kant, Hegel, Marx, and while they didn't buy into their economic theories, they were influenced by their epistemology, by their, not exactly mysticism, but by their duty premise, by their altruism, which comes from Christianity. So it's not that and it's not even that these businessmen were devout Christians. It was that they, although today they are, many of the better businessmen today, the more so-called pro-capitalist businessmen today, are devout Christians, and that's a big flaw, because what then makes them is altruists, and what makes it impossible for them to do is defend their capitalism, defend themselves. So it's altruism and mysticism that undermine it. Christianity is the driver of altruism and mysticism, but it doesn't explain it all. All right, Richard says, I believe Iran will confirm that the Israeli government got its 70s inflation under control, the same way that the UK did, cutting spending and freeing up the mixed economy a bit. I mean, it's interesting. Israel in the late 1970s, early 80s, saw a massive spike in inflation. Inflation reached several 100% in the early 1980s, I think it was. And that is a period of economic liberalization, actually freeing up the economy, but also a period where, in order to prevent people from supposedly feeling the costs of liberalization, because liberalization is It does create some winners and losers. It does, overall, people win, but it does create winners and losers. It is disruptive. It does create significant change. Suddenly, you thought you were in a safe profession, it's no longer safe. So it was very disruptive, the liberalization of the Israeli economy, the cutting of government spending, basically the dismantling of the unions that were basically running the country at that point. They were running the economy. The unions were the largest employer in Israel in the late 1970s. And that was all dismantled. And that created, in order to, in a sense, soften the blow of that, the government printed money like crazy into the mid-1980s. And the thing that actually crushed inflation ultimately was a combination of a few things. One is continued liberalization of the economy. Two, a stopping of the printing presses. And part of that was there was at least a threat of dollarizing the Israeli economy. There was one of the what do you call it? Finance ministers, economics ministers proposed dollarizing the economy. Now he lost his job over it because you don't dollarize in a nationalist place like Israel. But that idea of stopping printing money stuck, and they stopped printing money, and they managed to suck money out of the economy by incentivizing people not to spend it. So one of the things you can do is incentivize people to put it in the bank rather than spend it. And they did that, and they were, towards the late 80s, they were effective. But three, they also stopped government spending. They started shrinking government spending. And so they liberalized, which increases supply. They shrunk government spending, which decreases the inflow of money. And as a consequence, they could stop the printing presses. They did all those things, and that's how inflation got under control. Themaster says, this may have been answered. The left seem higher IQ than the right. Yes, I mean, to the extent that IQ means much, and to the extent that it's measured well, the left are, on average, based on IQ measures, and they're trying to measure more intelligent than the right. I think that's pretty safe to say. Do high IQ people gravitate to the left, or do the left believe in thinking more than the right? I think high IQ people gravitate to the left. It's where other high IQ people are. It's supposedly more cultured, more civilized. It's like brutish, at least in modern times. This wasn't always the case. It used to be that the right, what is considered the right, were the intellectuals, or at least a lot of intellectuals, were the business leaders, were rich people. And the left was the working class and the less educated. And it's flipped. Today, educated and rich leans left, and the working class leans right. So things are flipped. Things are flipped. But I think it's what's attractive. I mean, I've said this many times. If you're a Silicon Valley engineer, are you going to vote for somebody who doesn't believe in evolution? That's kind of what's going on. The right attracts people who don't want, who are advocates against evolution. Well, that's not very smart. It's not going to attract high IQ or high intelligence people if you're going to attack evolution. All right, we are 6 $20 questions away from our goal, so really, really close. Let's not miss our goal by just a little bit. We haven't had anybody come in with like 100, 150. Oh, well, we did last time. We had Troy from Australia. But none of the Americans recently have come in with like $150. We're kind of missing some of our whales, are not supporting the Iran Book Show as much as they used to. Not sure what's going on. So, chime in. We're pretty close to goal. By the way, we do have a front row event, Individualism, the Foundation of Freedom. This is a small group, under 20. Zoom with me. We can talk about, within the context of individualism, anything you want. It's your time. It's about an hour and a half, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, July 30th. It's Saturday. And you can register. There's a link in the chat where you can register. So don't forget to sign up for that and register for that. And we have a lot of fun in those. So hopefully you can join us. I think it's $100. I think it's $100. Richard is our big whale. Yes, Richard typically spends over $100 when he's on. But we used to have a lot of whales, and they used to go in and out. And I don't know where some of them have gone, disappeared. I don't know. It must have pissed them off or tired them out. I'm not sure. All right, so we have a bunch of $5 and $10 questions. We're going to go over those. We're still looking for between 5 to 6 $20 questions. So $20 questions open. Catherine Mendez, thank you for not just promoting the Super Chat, but also participating in it. Always appreciated. Let's start with J-Lord. J-Lord asks, I sometimes agree with Ayn Rand and sometimes don't. I'm a classical liberal, but I feel like the left has stolen the term liberal. So you agree? I'm not sure what I'm supposed to agree with. Yeah, I mean, the left has stolen the term. I think classical liberal is a good term. I prefer objectivist because I agree with Ayn Rand, so I'm an objectivist. I agree with her on all the philosophical issues. But if you agree with some and not with others, classical liberal is not a bad term. It vaguely represents somebody who's kind of generally on the pro-liberty side of things. But it's not a clear-cut ideology, because classical liberals can disagree pretty strongly on some pretty basic political questions, like abortion. So it's not a coherent political philosophy. It's just a general attitude. Michael asks, do you think the desire to tear down others comes from envy of bravery? Like the people who stood up to lockdown orders and Karens would call the police on them for not wearing masks. Well, I think it's envy of virtue. It's envy of the good for being the good. It's envy of any kind of virtue, bravery being just one virtue. But you can be envious of people for being successful because of their productivity. You can be envious of people who are successful because, I don't know, for any variety of reasons. And one of those reasons could be bravery. The point about envy is the hatred of the good for something good that they believe in, that they act based on. So it's for their virtues, for their goodness, for the very nature of their goodness. All right. Let's see. Let's update the super chat so everybody knows. So we remind people to keep coming, because we need to get to that 650. We're at $524, so we're almost there. Michael asks, is the book Guns, Germs, and Steel totally BS? Could you do a show debunking it? With that name in the title, it will get a lot of views. To debunk it, I would have to really dig into the book, and I don't have the time to do it. I don't think it's totally BS. I think it has a lot of interesting stories, a lot of interesting facts, a lot of interesting ideas in it. So I don't think it's totally BS, but I think the fundamental idea that history is determined by these kind of things is wrong. History is determined predominantly by ideas. Now, that's not to say everywhere. So, for example, cultures that just have bad ideas might, it could be that guns, germs, and steel determine them because they just have bad ideas, and it's external kind of stimuli that determine their path. There has to be some kind of battle of ideas for ideas to cause a change. There has to be a change in ideas for ideas to cause a change. But in cultures that are stagnant, it could be a drought, it could be germs, it could be lots of different things that cause a crisis. So there's an element of truth in the book, but it certainly is far from a comprehensive explanation of history. All right, Richard. Gunfire only going to take money out of my check one more time before my final year of school. I'll become a much more regular whale after next August. All right, I don't completely understand, although I understand the point that you're going to support the show even more after August, but only going to take money out of my check one more time. Why? I mean, before you finish school, but once you get a job, they're still going to take money out of your check, right? Out of your paycheck. So you're still going to be paying into the gunfight forever. I mean, I'm in a sweet place where I pay very little into them, but even I pay something. Richard continues, YouTube censors the Chinese characters for communist bandits. Yuan, what do you think about absurd exaggeration, humor? I think there's a limit, like self-deprecating humor, but it's okay as long as you're clearly kidding. Yeah, I mean, humor is a tricky subject, which I'm not a master at this. An objectivist who's written a book, did he ever finish it? I can't remember if he ever finished it on humor, which I should read. But humor's tricky. But exaggeration humor can be very funny. I mean, I like Faulty Towers or Blackadder, definitely exaggerated, not self-depreciating, but exaggerated. It can be very funny and very entertaining. What you don't want is humor where you're making fun of yourself in a overly self-depreciating way. You can make fun of yourself in a light way without doing too much harm, but why put yourself down? Richard says, they'll take it forever, but only one more time this fiscal year. Should have been more clear there. Okay, fiscal year. Your fiscal year ends in one more paycheck. Okay. Not calendar year, fiscal year. You're being very technical here, Richard. All right, but I get it. You're going to have a lot more money come August, which is great. Oh, Jeffrey says, what is Jeffrey? More customers in the restaurant tonight because of the YBS show. All right, so if you have customers right now at the restaurant who are YBS listeners, send them my regards. But I'm happy to encourage people to go to Jeffrey's restaurant. I loved the meal I had there. It was really fantastic. It was one of the most fun sushi meals I've ever had. And it was unique because the fish I was having, I've never had before as sushi. So it was phenomenal. Jeffrey, I know I should know this, but remind me the name of the restaurant so I can pitch it right now. Last time I had to look it up quickly on the internet and pretend that I actually remembered. But I'm terrible about these things. It really is. All right, I don't know if Jeffrey's listening at a lag, so I'm just going to look it up quickly so I can pitch the restaurant. So maybe Rosella. Sorry, Rosella in New York City. It's Rosella. It's in the Lower East Side. I think you call that area the Lower East Side, and it's fantastic. So keep going, guys. Keep going. All right, Jeffrey with another $20. He's getting very, very close to getting us to the $650. We're $11 short. That's it. He says, this would have been a better question for the last episode, but can you explain the significance of Project X? Robert Stadler. The restaurant is Rosella. Yeah, I looked it up. All right. This is a big question, Jeffrey. It's not a simple question. What is the significance? I mean, it's not a hard question, but it's not a quick question. What is the significance of Project X, Dr. Stadler, in Atlas Shrugged? Now, granted, there are going to be spoilers here. They're going to be spoilers. So be it. If you haven't read Atlas Shrugged, maybe you should turn off the podcast or the YouTube or whatever. So Dr. Stadler's Project X is it basically is illustrates what happens to one when one compromises with evil. What happens to one when one sells out to evil? Even if you yourself are convinced that you are not evil, that you would not do bad, your compromise with evil helps evil, supports evil, promotes evil. So in Atlas Shrugged, the bad guys could have never built Project X. Project X is a weapon that kills huge numbers of people. They couldn't have built the Project X. They couldn't have built the weapon without Stadler's help. Stadler builds it because he believes that he can control how they use it. He can control how they use it, and at the same time, he can do the good that he wants to do, the good research. But as soon as he buys into their system, as soon as he gives them the sanction, and this is where he's sanctioning evil, as soon as you sanction evil, you lose control over how they're going to use that sanction. And if you work with evil, you compromise with evil, you give values to evil, that's how they get powerful. So the Soviet Union couldn't have gotten an atomic weapon, certainly not when they got it. Maybe they would have ultimately when they got it, without spies, Americans, working in the nuclear program in the United States, spying for them. People living in America, supporting evil, making evil possible. And the thing about Stadler that is particularly tragic in Atlas Shrugged is that he is portrayed as a genius of his time, as a man who could have been something different, who could have been a good guy, and certainly had the mental skill, the intelligence to know how bad things could get, that what his sanction would provide. And he was told, and he evaded, in order so he could continue doing his research, so not to interrupt him, so he didn't have to bother. And as part of that, he basically makes possible this horrific weapons that kills, I don't know, millions of people. So the significance is the importance of never compromising with evil, never sanctioning evil, never providing value to evil. It's the strike on steroids. It's not just that they're taking your money now, but they're taking your mind. They're taking your creations. And it's not just that they're wasting it, they're using it to build a weapon that'll kill millions of people, and it's your fault. So Stadler should have gone on strike, and the fact that he didn't go on strike, this is what happens. This is the consequence. This is the scale of the evil. It is a small story, a sub-story that is a dramatic illustration of the big story. The role of reason in human life. And what happens when reason, good guys, sanction evil, the kind of destruction that happens, the scale of it. All right, thank you, Jeffrey, and for the $10 extra, I appreciate it. That got us to over the 650. Really, thank you. Looking forward to my next time in New York. Roger asks, can we have a show with Amish Adalja on an objective assessment of Dr. Fauci? I think Adalja's reluctance to rip into Fauci suggests our disdain for Fauci should be more measured, or that a Fauci timeline would be informative. I mean, I think it is a challenge. Look, Fauci, I think Amish's point is this. Fauci was put in an impossible position where he was, as a scientist, he was required to do policy when he should have never been in a position to be dictating policy. He should just be in a position to provide facts and let the people who do policy do policy. But because the people who did policy, i.e. the Trump administration, basically defaulted on doing anything, he was put in a position where he had to propose and defend policy, which is not his forte. So the way Amish, I think, judges Fauci is qua scientist, qua, you know, the science of what he does. Now, I think there's some questions regarding even his scientific recommendations during COVID. I'm not as positive about Fauci as I think Amish is during COVID. But look, Fauci in the field is a heroic character because of the work he did on AIDS and the work he did post-AIDS and his work as a scientist post-AIDS. I think that being a government employee takes a toll on you. I also think that being put in a position he was in the Trump administration, I think was more than just policy. I think it took a toll on him in other dimensions as well. And I think he did not live up. And I don't think Biden should have kept him in that position. But you know, we could try to dig in more with Amish on it. I'm not sure that Amish wants to publicly fully express his views on Fauci, right? But I, you know, so and I can understand why, right? He doesn't want to necessarily go there, but I mean, Amish has been incredibly right on so much of this on COVID. And I have a huge amount of respect for him, and I wouldn't want to push him on this Fauci thing. I think there'll be a time to do an evaluation, partially when this is over, partially when Fauci doesn't have the kind of power that he still has within the field. All right. Richard says, I've signed up for the front row event. Excellent. Thank you. I think we're over. I think we're over now. Step up, listeners. If you get value from the show, and I know you do, Richard says, give Yaron the same amount of money you spend on that latte you're sipping right now. Oh, it's too late for a latte. But yeah, that you sipped this morning. Thank you, Richard. Really, really appreciate it. Yes, we're at $689.39, at least according to my Super Chat Tracker app that I love. I love this thing. It's fantastic. Fantastic. Never too late for a latte. I wouldn't sleep if I had a latte right now. No way would I get any sleep. All right, let's run through the $5 to $10 questions. Keep going on there. There are quite a few of these. Hopper Campbell, he says, off topic. Even though intellectually Germany is the most anti-capitalist country in Western Europe, it by far has the highest GDP of any Western country. Why is this? I think because it basically has systems in place that are economically relatively free. It's not capitalist, but it's relatively free. That in spite of the intellectuals' abhorrent attitude towards capitalism, towards free markets, the political system, partially because of its history, post-World War II and the success of market economics post-World War II, has been more tilted towards markets in a way. I also think there's something to German precision engineering, its ability to do that, the German educational system, which emphasizes engineering and crafts in the sense of kind of engineering skills, not necessarily even a university degree in engineering, just the ability to engineer stuff is phenomenal, and therefore they have a robust export industries and export capacity. And look, the differences in level of freedom between different countries in the West is not that great, so you have to look for other factors. And in Germany, I think you look for the ability to produce particularly precision stuff, and whether it's great cars or whether it's great appliances or whether it's machine tools. They're very good with it. You know, they export machine tools, Precision manufacturing is what they're experts at. And it's a question of how do you explain why the Germans are so good at that. It has something to do with education. It's something to do with a German orientation to details, which is part of the culture. But you would have to really study German culture to get a deeper sense of what's going on there. All right. Harper Campbell also asked, if I had never read Rand and all I saw was her Phil Donahue interview, I wouldn't have been blown away. The stage presence matter in changing a culture as much as academic writing and novels. I mean, stage presence is important for the marketing. It's important to get people to read the papers, so there has to be, at the end of the day, somebody charismatic communicating the material. Somebody who convinces you to read the book. Kant couldn't have directly impacted the culture. He impacted the culture through a whole chain of intellectuals who took his ideas and applied them and presented them and taught them and either in the classroom or with charisma and integrated them into novels, integrated them into their art, integrated them into their view of life. And that's how the ideas had an impact on the world. So, and in that sense, stage presence is one way in which it's not enough because you have to have something behind. The stage presence is just a means. It's just a door. There has to be somewhere they're going. There has to be the philosophy there. But yes, I think having the stage presence is important. I think delivering a message in an intriguing way so that people are curious is important. All of that is important. All right, James Taylor asks, how do we know the delusions of schizophrenic persons are not real? But what we normal people perceive is the truth of existence. Well, we know it because we can test it, right? If the schizophrenic says, I see a unicorn under the table, and we use every instrument that we have from every one of our senses and every instrument we have technologically, and there's no unicorn down there, we can't observe it, then he's making stuff up. And every time we say, look at this dog, and everybody can come up and pet the dog, and there's the dog, right? Not just because we see it, but because we can pet it. So it's obviously not a creation of my individual mind, because other senses are confirming it, and other people's senses are confirming it, and scientific instruments are confirming it. Then we know that that's the truth of existence. So the truth of existence is confirmed, not just by multiple senses and by scientific investigation. And the schizophrenic, it's not. Michael, would you say Americans are significantly less altruistic than Europeans and Canadians? What is the cause of this today, given the Enlightenment ideas are neutered in both continents? I think the differences are fading. I certainly think Americans used to be less altruistic. I think to some extent they still are. There's still a remnant of the American sense of life. And I think the American sense of life is fundamentally egoistic. And that's what keeps it going. And that was established from Enlightenment ideas, but through kind of the land of immigrants, independent people coming out to seek their own fortune. This is one of the great evils of stopping immigration, is that immigrants fuel this sense of life. They are the risk takers. They are the travelers. They are the people who come here to make life better for themselves. They're the individualists, whether they know it or not. Europe is a more stagnant place, and as a consequence, it's more altruistic. Europe, while less Christian than America, has adopted that, altruism from secular religion, from Kant and the German Romantics and Rousseau and really everybody. And America's still dominated in terms of its altruism by Christianity, and that's what keeps it alive in America and keeps it thriving in America, in spite of this other trend that pushes us towards individualism. All right. Michael asks, off topic, but I was thinking about this. Why did Hitler never visit a concentration camp? Was he afraid of his own creation, like Dr. Jekyll and Dr. Hyde? There was no reason for him to. I mean, I don't know why he would. I don't know that he didn't ever visit a concentration camp, but if he didn't, I don't think that he was afraid of his own creation. I just think that it was the dirty work. I think he viewed it as dirty work, and why should he dirty his hands? Why should he have to see it, right? As long as he knew it was happening, that was good enough. All right, Richard is back. Do you think a unique, interesting accent? Do you think having a unique, interesting accent increases persuasiveness? I think you and Ayn Rand were a bit more captivating, interesting to me as a teenager, at least in part because of unique accents. I don't know. I mean, I know a lot of people who are turned off by my accent. I've never heard anybody really turned off by Ayn Rand's, but by my accent, you see a lot in the comment section below my videos, a lot of people who try to make fun of it and are turned off by it. Some people who claim they agree with the ideas but can't listen to me because of the accent. So I don't know. I certainly think that some accents are very appealing from intellectually. I think a British accent, a kind of an Oxford British accent, is very appealing for an intellectual. I have Oxford English accent envy, jealousy, I think. I don't envy them. I'm jealous of them. I'd love to have that sophisticated accent. I think I'd have a much bigger audience if I spoke like Douglas Murray. I mean, I'm jealous of Douglas Murray's accent. So, yeah, I don't think so, but it's interesting, Richard, that you had that response and found me more interesting because of my accent. You're the first person who's told me that. All right, Dave. New Yorkers won't put up with legalizing shoplifting crap they pulled in California. I agree. Look, they're not tolerating it in California either. They're kicking out of office the district attorneys that advocated for that. So it won't last in New York, and it won't last in California. Human beings, American people, I keep telling you that the nutty left in that sense can't win. It reaches a point where it can't win. They give the nutty left lip service because they think they have the moral high ground, until the right will capture the moral high ground and wrap us all into their theocracy. Chris says, has complexity, chaos, emergent science contributed in anything substantial to economics? I don't really think so, except asking a lot of questions and challenging a lot of assumptions, which is healthy. But I don't think in terms of something positive, I don't think they've contributed much. Some better statistical tools, some better mathematical tools, but there's been a lot of money invested in complexity theory, trying to explain the economy or trying to predict stock prices using complexity theory. As far as I know, that has not resulted in anything of value. Richard says, you should have taken us with you to see the fridge kitchen. It's not a fridge kitchen. It's just a big slab, one of these big things of just bottled water. It's on the floor. I have a bathroom off my office here. It's on the floor in the bathroom, and I just ripped the plastic and pulled the bottle out of there. So nothing to see. Nothing to see. James says, have you been to every state in New England? Which did you enjoy most? What did you think about them and the culture? Yeah, I've been to every state in New England. Yeah, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire. I've been to every one of them. I've been to every state in the United States except for two. The only two states I've not been in are North Dakota and Alaska. But I've been to 48 states. what did I think? I mean, look, Vermont, I think is the most beautiful of them. The mountains there, the valleys, the dramatic peaks. I haven't been in Vermont in a long time. I think Vermont is the most beautiful of them. Maine is also beautiful. New Hampshire also, but I think Vermont is the most dramatic and most beautiful. Oh, the Maine coast is gorgeous. So Maine might be the most beautiful. So Maine and Vermont are the most beautiful. I don't know. I didn't spend enough time there to tell the culture. I mean, I spent a lot of time in Massachusetts, which is Boston is an amazing city. It's a university town, very left, but also very vibrant, lots of culture, great museums, great orchestras, great restaurants. I'm not particularly impressed by Connecticut or Rhode Island. Boston's a great city. Massachusetts a very beautiful state. It has a great history. I think the thing about New England that strikes me the most is the history. But I don't know a lot of, I haven't spent enough time to really know about a culture of a place. You have to be with the people, talk to the people, really get a sense of the place. And I don't really have that yet of every state there. KFAX says, $10. I spent roughly this much on a 22-ounce beer I'm drinking right now. That's an expensive beer. Must be. I hope it's a good beer. 22 ounces. That's a lot, though. Enjoy. I'm not a beer drinker. Can't say I like beer. I'm a wine drinker. Not an expert, just a wine drinker. Theme Master says that latte is his favorite coffee. All right, I'm an Americano guy. And I like the Nespresso. We just have pods here. We have the pods. I like the Italian pods, strong coffee. But I do a long one. I hate espresso. I don't get espresso. I like a big mug of coffee that I get to sit there and sip slowly over half an hour, contemplating the universe, watching the ocean, maybe out there looking for manatees, because we have manatees that swim out there right in front of our condo, or just sitting there and reading email or reading a book or something. I like the taste of an espresso, but it's too quick. It passes like that. So I like Americano, which is, double espresso with a bunch of water. It gives it body. You still have the strong flavor of the espresso. I don't like milk in my coffee. And what I really hate is any sweetener in the coffee. Coffee should not have sweetener in it. Sweetener is nasty. So no sweetener in coffee. Okay, Richard says, since we're on coffee, after dinner espresso and sambuco is sometimes nice. Definitely not an everyday thing, but from time to time, especially on a cold night, it just hits just right. It does, but for me, it won't allow me to sleep. Now, when I was young, a big mug of coffee after dinner was a must. Every dinner ended with coffee. But then at some point, I couldn't metabolize the coffee fast enough to be able to sleep. So that's just me. All right, the Objectivist blog. I don't know what the Objectivist blog is. Who's on the Objectivist blog? All right. The Objectivist blog asks, let's get some sponsors together to do a show on Korean drama. I believe art of this caliber warrants an entire show for discussion. I have to admit that so far, the only two Korean dramas, well, no, I've seen another one, but the only two really good Korean dramas that I've seen from beginning to end, that I've enjoyed from beginning to end without, they really stand out to me as wow, right? Were, God. The one I really like, and whose name will come to me in a second, right? This is me having one of those moments. And the other one was My Country, which is another historical Korean drama, which I loved and I thought was incredibly powerful. Mr. Sunshine. But all the others, and I've started many of them that you guys have recommended, I just haven't gotten through them. They're too light. Somebody said, the one with the same actress as Mr. Sunshine, and they said, Day Gun is amazing, right? So that's the third one. But I can't most all the ones in modern settings, I just can't get into. There's something too light about them. There's something too unserious about them. Even the one where she lands up in North Korea, it's just not interesting enough. There's just not, I don't know. There's something about them that's just not that exciting. The one with the same actress as Mr. Sunshine, she plays a young girl, and it's flaky, and it's just not, Mr. Sunshine is just, I really do think it's in a world and a caliber of its own. Crash Landing on You, it was good, but I couldn't watch the whole thing. I wasn't that interested. I really like My Country. I like the end of My Country because, well, I can't remember the exact end of My Country, but My Country is a very, very powerful movie on the meaning of patriotism, and what patriotism means to different people, and how patriotism, in the context of the movie, can go to love of self and family, to love of village, to love of country, and under what circumstances any one of those is appropriate. Very powerful, very values-oriented. I know that people have recommended Startup and Itaewon Class. I'll try them. I haven't yet. I'm hoping they're serious, and the characters are not flaky. I find the Korean modern characters to be too, I don't know, a little unserious. All right. Anyway, I'm all for having more shows on art, and if you can raise the money to do more shows on art, including Korean drama, let's go for it. I'm happy to do it. I can talk about what Korean shows I've seen and what I like or don't like about certain shows. All right, Richard is back. You should try Startup and Itaewon Class. Okay, it's on my list now. It's been on my list for a while. In my opinion, there's a certain seriousness to it, and both take themselves seriously. Good. I will try them. Theme Master says, does Atlas Society honestly believe it's better for objectivism to be more tolerant? Yeah, well, they don't really have a conception of objectivism. So it's better for this vague notion they have of what objectivism should be or is, or what they'd like it to be, or what emotionally they'd feel good if it was. And toleration is part of that. But that's the sense in which they don't have a strong notion of objectivism. That's why they can add virtues, they can add stuff, they can, objectivism it's not a system. It's fungible, flexible. And in that kind of system, why not? Let's be tolerant. It's not objectivism as Ayn Rand developed it. It's not her philosophy. Her philosophy couldn't have toleration in it, toleration in a sense, in this particular sense. Not toleration in the sense of the Enlightenment, which was you don't kill people you disagree with. But in the sense of you don't morally evaluate people for their ideas. That's the toleration they advocate for. All right, Jeffrey, that's a great shirt. Thank you. It looks like good fabric. I don't know. Do you have a preferred brand or store? I promise I will not steal your brand. I do. All my shirts are pretty much from two brands that are out of existence. They don't sell the same shirts anymore that they used to buy, so the cuts are different now. But one was Calibrate, which I used to buy at Nordstrom's, but you could also buy online, but they're just not the same anymore. And this one is a Bar 3, which you used to buy at Macy's and stuff. So all my shirts are pretty cheap. Maybe cheap's not the right word. Inexpensive. I don't buy expensive clothes. I have expensive shoes because I found one shoe that really is amazingly comfortable, so I bought a bunch of them, and that's all I wear. I have expensive shoes. What else do I have expensive? I don't have expensive clothes. I have one designer for all my jackets. I just buy the same thing over and over again. A jacket wears out, I buy the same thing. And that's Hugo Boss. I just buy Hugo Boss jackets. I have a few Hugo Boss slacks. I have some nice shirts. I wore some at Ocon that are expensive. But all my day-to-day stuff is super inexpensive. And it's good stuff. You can buy really good stuff, but most of my shirts are colored bratte, both my long sleeve and my short sleeve, and they've gone, I don't think they've gone out of business, but they don't sell the same type of clothes. Richard, can we get a feature for crowdfunding shows so we can pledge 50 towards a YBS or K-drama or art? Yeah, I mean, people have done it. You can take the initiative and start a GoFundMe or start a PayPal thing. I'll work with Angela. Maybe we can create something like that on the website. It's not, none of us are programmers, and it's not easy. If there's a programmer here who wants to volunteer to add to my website a crowdfunding feature, that would be great. The problem is, how do you refund the money? So if somebody wants to think that through and offer a solution, maybe, you know, I know a bunch of you are programmers out there, that would be terrific. Maybe Action Jackson can find somebody who can create something like this, but it's not something I can just whip together. Richard also says, my friends are on the Objectivist blog. Good to see it up and running now. Mr. Sunshine was the one you're thinking of. Yes, it came to me ultimately. I've only been talking about it for years now. You'd think I'd remember the name. Thank you, Richard. James, will a bad economy give the Republicans the presidency? Yes, I mean, I think the one thing that can deny the presidency from Republicans is Trump. Trump lost to Biden. I think, look at Biden's approval ratings right now. I think any Republican pretty much could beat him, except maybe Trump. The only person who has probably lower approval ratings right now than Biden is Trump. Maybe not, you know, I don't know exactly, but pretty low. So if Republicans will nominate pretty much anybody other than, then I think Republicans win the presidency in 2024. Even if the economy recovers a little bit. Richard says, I know my friend at the Objectivist blog is a programmer. That'd be great. I know a bunch of the listeners are programmers, including the guy who designed the Super Chat tracker, which I love. Friend Harper, I was just thinking as I was reading Harper, the other Harper's questions, I was thinking, where is Friend Harper, right? We've got Harper Campbell and Friend Harper, and so here he is, Friend Harper. Reflecting on life today a little, and I wanted to show appreciation from your Rules for Life series. Your advice pulled me out of a bad place, and a super chat is too short to tell the whole story. Keep up the life-changing work. Wow, thank you, Friend Harper. I really appreciate that. You know, my Rules for Life series does not get a lot of views. It does do well in super chat, but it does not get a lot of views. So the stories of people who say that it really impacts them are inspiring, and I care about it. The other question I have about the Rules for Life is, how long should I keep it going? Because not everybody goes back to listen to old shows, and there's some value to repetitions. Should I continue to only have new Rules for Life? Should I repeat some of the old ones? These are all things I'm trying to think of. I've still got a few more Rules for Life that I'm going to do that are new, but then the question should be, should I start repeating, or should I just take old ones and frame them differently? Because I think there's power in hearing these ideas over and over and over again, and it's inspiring to hear somebody say, your life is yours, take it seriously. It's amazing how much power just me saying that has had for so many people out there. And that's really the theme of Rules for Life, and I want to keep it going. In that sense, I don't want it to end. Wow, we've got an hour and 20 minutes. All right, it's too long, guys. We need 2 hours and 20 minutes. Sorry, we need to keep these to 2 hours. So we're gonna have to figure out how to get to 650 in 2 hours. But we did get to $872. So thank you, everybody. Thank you again for all of, Friend Harper has another one. To ease the confusion, call me number one, Super Harper, and call Harper Campbell that Campbell guy. I could do that. I could do Campbell and Harper. I could separate Harper from Campbell. We'll figure it out. I think we'll survive. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for all the support. Thanks for all the questions. Thanks for sticking around. Don't forget to like the show before you leave. Those of you who do not listen live and who are listening on a podcast or listening on YouTube later on, please remember to like the show, but also share it. And, of course, you can support the Yaron Brook Show on yaronbrookshow.com/support. You can do so on Patreon and on Subscribestar and even on Locals. I will see you all on Saturday. I'm not sure yet exactly what time on Saturday, but there will be a show on Saturday. And, yeah. Oh, we're doing songs on Saturday and Sunday. And I have listened to all the songs you've asked me to listen to. Now I have to think about what I think of those songs. Some of them are easy, some of them not so easy. So now next point is to bring up the lyrics. And I have to remind everybody, and I'll remind you when I do this, I'm not an expert. I'm not a musician. I'm not an expert on lyrics. I'm not an expert on any of this stuff. So these are just my subjective thoughts and feelings about them. Do with it what you will. Bye, everybody. See you Saturday.